In this video, I'm going to be sharing all about how do you pick a camera out for YouTube or for video production, and kind of a camera buyer's guide, sharing really 10 of the things that I look for when it comes to picking out a camera, as well as some of the different features, and doing some Q&A as well. So if you are just joining this, it's a live stream, but if you're here on the rebroadcast, this video is going to be all about how to choose a camera for video and YouTube. Now, we're going to be sharing a lot of content in this video, and we'll definitely get to your questions, and it's going to be a little bit different. Here on Think Media, we do, a lot of times 5-10 minute videos, but this is more of a deep dive, really getting into the nitty gritty of the content. And so thanks so much for being here, whether on the rebroadcast or if you're here live. Cowcraft, Lulz, Watt, Lola, Isabel, guys, thanks so much for being here. I'm super pumped. So let's dive into the content right now. And so today's topic is all about how to choose a camera for YouTube and video. And so how do we do this? Let's click it up. Let's go for it. If we're just meeting, my name's Sean Cannell, and my passion is to help you build your influence with video. And we're going to be talking about video gear today. So thanks so much for being here. And hey, if you can hear me loud and clear, I see you, Pixel Boy, ADV, hello. Kimberly, thanks for being here. Guys, Miguel, if you guys can hear me, sharing is caring, right? So can you spread the word? Maybe just tweet this out, whatever your favorite social media platform, especially friends, family, mothers, fathers, brothers, dads. This is the camera buyer's guide that I wish I had, talking about all the features to look for in a camera. So definitely share this out. I think a lot of people get value from this content. So here's our mission today. We've got the training. We're going to go through all the content. I also got a cool free download, particularly related to video cameras and video gear. And then we will get to your questions, and I think that we'll have a lot of questions. Now, huge disclaimer on this particular video. Gigantic disclaimer for today, and that is a couple things. And so number one, this is a conversation, so definitely engage in the comments. It's great to see you, Jonathan, Zach Plays Games, Ella, thanks so much for being here. Engage in the live chat, or if you're on the replay, definitely engage in the comments. And I don't mean this is one way, like I know everything about cameras. This is a conversation. You know a lot. You have your own experience. You've worked with different brands. I haven't tested every camera in the world. You've tested some. So I really want this to be a conversation. Secondly, treat everyone with respect. Here's the thing. There's so many passionate people about Sony's better, no Panasonic, no Olympus, whatever. And it's fine if you disagree with me. I don't care if you disagree. I don't even care if you think I'm completely wrong and, that I'm not even smart when it comes to cameras. But I do think we all need to treat each other with decency and respect. And so disagreement is fine, but if you are disrespectful and you're just being like a bad person, like an indecent human being, boom, we'll kick you out of here. Heather is in the comments. You'll see her there, my team. And so we just want to have good vibes only here, especially for this particular stream, but always on Think Media. The focus of this presentation next is video, not photography. So a lot of these cameras crush photography, but we're talking about how do you pick out the best camera for YouTube and for video production. And my goal is to keep this as simple as possible, but a huge disclaimer is it does get geeky. So put on your seatbelt because it does get definitely tech. So let me ask you this. Have you noticed that cameras can be confusing? Like, let me know in the live chat or in the comments. Have you noticed, like, it's so tough? Like, you're like, I thought this camera was good. And then you're like, oh, I didn't realize, it didn't have this thing. And then you're frustrated. Maybe you've bought a camera that you were like, I thought it was great. And then you're like, oh, then I saw this thing. I mean, cameras are super confusing, right? There's so many different models. There's so many different brands. So, let me know. Have you found that cameras are confusing? Tymo says yes. Mars GIA is like, yeah. Oh, yeah, white doves. I think we all agree. Like, this subject can be super confusing. And so that's one of the points of this live stream. And before we get into it, I want to say, always start where you are with what you already have. The best camera to have is the one you already do have. So never feel like you're constrained by gear that you don't have yet. It's always all about the creator, not necessarily the camera, right? But Video gear is important. It does help us level up our production and all those types of things. But I get gear envy. I'm sure you get gear envy. Just remember that it's always about the camera you actually do have. And always think about like starting right where you are, but then having a dream to level up, especially as maybe you build your income with YouTube, you build your income online, or if you're doing videography, video production for weddings or events. You know, we always have a dream list, and I think that this video will help us build that list out. Now, 4 things I always consider when it comes to making a camera buying decision. These are 4 things that you're kind of forced to consider, right? Number 1's budget. You know, what's your budget? It doesn't matter if you want the greatest camera in the world. If you only have like $1,000 total, that's all you have. That's your full budget. So you want to think about, what is your budget? Answer that question. How much do you have allocated to be investing in a camera? Second is features. You know, so based on your budget, how many features can you pack inside of that budget? Isn't this funny? This golden Pentax camera, awesome. I love that. And then size. You know, next, maybe you want a bunch of features, but you're planning on traveling all the time. You're planning on being on the road. Well, you could get a huge camera that can do a lot of cool things, but you never take it with you. It doesn't fit in your luggage. It doesn't, or maybe you don't need to travel. So then I like to consider size. And then your skill level. You know, this is a Canon cinema camera. This might look kind of intimidating to you, right? So even though it can do a lot of cool things, it looks cool. What is your current skill level? And there's no shame to start with a camera that is maybe simple and easy to use, learn how to use it, even start producing money with it. You know what I mean? You start doing some photo shoots, some video shoots, you start getting some YouTube revenue, some YouTube ads. You can always upgrade later. So always, you know, maybe start with the skill level. If you get too many features and it overwhelms you, that can be a bad thing. So these are kind of like the 4 things that I like to use as a framework as we dive into this. Now, here's a huge mistake that I also see people make all the time. They don't budget, they're not budgeting for other accessories. So let's say you're like, all right, Sean, my budget is $1,000. What's up, Left Coast? Thanks for being here. Dude, I would love your engagement in this conversation. They're going to share some cool things. But a huge mistake I see people make is they're like, I got $1,000 total. So they go buy a camera body for $1,000, no lens. And then they're like, because I want this camera body, but now you can't even use it because you don't have the lens. But what about lighting? What about the microphone? You know, what about a tripod? So a huge mistake I see people make, especially for YouTube, is they don't actually budget for, you know, other accessories. So let's jump into the foundation, the 10 basic camera features that personally I think are most important, that I look for when choosing a camera for video, when choosing a camera for YouTube. And these are the top 10. So number 1 is sensor size. Sensor size. So when picking out a camera, I really like to go for, you know, I like to consider, what is the sensor size of the camera. So this is actually this is like the most important part of the camera, because this is actually where the image is created. So when you put a lens on here, this sensor underneath is what is translating the image and making it into a picture, making it into a video clip, right? And so right now you're actually seeing this on a GH5 that I'm live streaming from, that has a micro four thirds sensor, for example, and it's producing this kind of image. So here's what a sensor size influences. It influences the image quality. It influences the depth of field. And so if you've ever wondered, how do I get that cool blurry background? The larger the sensor, the more cool blurry backgroundness you can get. It also influences the low light performance. And so the larger the sensor, you can do better if you were shooting something just candlelight, like a romantic dinner or something, and you were shooting some video production. Bigger sensor is going to do better in low light. Bigger usually equals better, and bigger also equals more expensive. So hold your breath, because this next slide is kind of crazy. All right, so here's kind of some comparisons of sensor sizes for cameras. So your smartphone is like this itty bitty sensor. It makes sense because your smartphone is not that large. They can't put a huge sensor in there. But smartphones, keep in mind, if you're like, whoa, that like iPhone, that Samsung takes amazing photo and video, always keep that in mind. Like, this all is kind of relative, and small sensors can produce a cool image. Lots of smartphones create great images. But next up is very common lately. You could see like some of maybe the Canon ELPHs are going to be like these sizes of sensors here. But one very popular and desirable sensor size is 1 inch. And you'll see that in like the Sony RX100, or even like the G7X, right? So this is a very popular camera, the Sony RX100 flip screen. You start getting to a camera like this, you're talking about like a 1-inch sensor. Next up is that 4/3 sensor. You are seeing a micro 4/3 sensor right now. This GH5 is a micro 4/3. And then next up is an APS-C sensor. So this sensor size is a little bit bigger now, and this is probably the most common for YouTube. So in that size, T7I's, the Sony A6500 is APS-C sensor. And then finally, most common is full frame. So then you move into a full frame sensor. This is what pro photographers want, pro videographers. An A7S II is a full frame sensor. And so for YouTube, this range right here is usually perfect for YouTube. Now you could go either direction, and your smartphone is also great for YouTube, but most of the time I recommend people kind of be in this APS-C. And this is also where things are still relatively affordable. Things get more expensive as you head up the line on the sensor size. So remember, sensor size equals image quality, depth of field, and low light performance. All right, the second thing I like to look for is video resolution. Now this is kind of a cool image because does anybody remember DVDs? You know, let me know in the live chat or in the comments. Maybe you still have DVDs. Do you have a DVD player still? And do you still use it? If you remember DVDs, that's 480p. That is how big a DVD is compared to 1080p. Now 1080p, that's like a Blu-ray. That's how big that would be. There's a Blu-ray. And then 4K is that big. It's 4 times larger than 1080p, just to give you an idea. And so people are saying like, LOL, yes, I still got DVDs. Some people saying I sold them, right? And so 1080p is kind of the standard, but you can see how big 4K is. So I like to consider what video resolution is desirable for me, and what do I plan on editing and things like that. So 1080p is usually the most common. A T4i, all the Canons are usually 1080p still. At 2.7K, there isn't really cameras too often that actually do that. There's some Blackmagics, but like this action camera from Yi, this 4K action camera, also has like a setting for 2.7K. It's usually a 4K camera that can also do like a lower resolution. And then 4K, a lot of the Sonys, some of the new Panasonics, they're doing 4K, and then definitely in between. So when it comes to video resolution, HD is still definitely the standard. 4K is becoming more mainstream, but keep in mind that only 16% of US households right now own a 4K TV. So it's really not that big yet. But one thing that's nice about a larger resolution is it's nice for editing and cropping in. And here's what I mean. Is sometimes maybe your final output to YouTube is going to be 1080p, but see, if you have 4K image resolution, you can actually crop in, and like this section would fit inside of the 1080p, this section would fit inside of there. So it just gives you like a little bit of editing options for cropping in. And remember guys, Heather's is taking your live chat right now, so we will do Q&A, so definitely post your questions. So the next thing I like to pick out is like, what video resolution do I want? All right, number 3 is your aperture. Now your aperture and also affects lens options. If you have a fixed lens camera, this point and shoot, the Sony RX100 V right here is a fixed lens. The aperture, you can't change the lens. So whatever aperture on here that you get, that's all you get. And but if you have a camera with interchangeable lenses, then you can pretty much get anything that you want if you ever upgrade your lenses. So this is going to influence also your low light performance, also your depth of field. It's what can give you that blurry background. And this is also going to give you, if it's a lower number, it usually means better. And a lower number also means more expensive, right? And so like a 1.8 lens, you also can see what the aperture does. It's actually what lets light into the sensor. So this lens would go in front of the camera, and then all of that image data would go through the lens to the sensor, and all the light would be let in on the sensor too. And then if you're out on a sunny day, it's the reason why your aperture would be stopped down, is what you would call it. And so here's an example of where you could see what the aperture is and why that also affects the price of cameras. So a Canon G7X, very popular YouTube camera, starts at 1.8. That's great. And that's one reason why that camera looks great in low light is because it has that fast, what you'd call aperture or a fast lens, 1.8. The same is true about the Sony RX100 V. These are fixed lens cameras, and they can start at 1.8. So not only can you also get that nice kind of blur behind you because of the aperture, but also it's really good as it gets dark out in lower light situations. Now, another popular camera that's out is this Sony DSC HX80. And this is G7X. Maybe this is $600 here in the US around right now, the Mark II. This one might be around $350. And you might think that all the features are equal generally, and a lot kind of are, but notice, this one actually starts at 3.5 on the aperture, is as low as it goes. So you'll notice on cheaper cameras, a lot of times the kit lens that comes with cameras, you're like, whoa, it starts at 3.5. It starts at 4 on the aperture, and that's why your image might be looking bad when it gets dark in lower lights if you shoot in your house and you don't have lighting. And so that is the next thing to consider is the aperture. Now, here's a picture that we just took with a Canon SL2. So it's a APS-C camera, and it's not a very expensive camera, but we put a very expensive lens on the camera. It was a 50mm 1.2 from Canon. And so this is the combination of the sensor size, but also the lens is how this could be in focus, and how right behind, just like a foot or two, Omar is blurred out. If this is the effect you want, that's going to kind of be a combination between the aperture and the sensor size. So one question to ask about maybe the gear you already have is, what is the starting aperture for your lens? Can you upgrade your lenses later? You know, because maybe you're like, oh, well, I don't have any fast lenses. You could potentially upgrade your lenses, and your aperture plus your sensor equals your low light performance. So if you've got a fast lens, so here's a good example. This is a full frame camera. It's a full frame sensor, and it's a 35mm 1.4 lens. So this guy right here, it's a Sony a7S II, and that lens, that thing's gonna just crush low light performance. It's gonna be an amazing image, but we talk about as you get to these higher features, these cameras can get more expensive. So this setup is $4,000, right? You want to get this body here in the US, this lens together, $4,000. So it should look good at that price. And again, you don't need to spend that much to get great quality, but these are some of the things that people aspire to. This is why that's such a desirable lens and camera, because it can produce such amazing results. So always ask yourself, can you invest in a camera body now and upgrade your lenses later? And that's what's really great about having an interchangeable lens. All right, the number 4 thing I look specifically for creating video content and YouTube content. And if you're a solo shooter, this matters even more. Most people, you shoot by yourself. You're trying to create YouTube videos in your office, in your bedroom, you know, in your living room, and you're just sitting there by yourself. You want that really good autofocus during video, and one of the brands known for having really the greatest is Canon with dual pixel autofocus. So that's what we talk about. You can see the image is going to the sensor, and what it's kind of saying here is like, or light in the image is kind of going into the sensor, and that sensor is equipped with this autofocus. So, you know, for some crazy motion, it can track, you know, movement and things like that. So I look for face tracking, fast autofocus, meaning you don't want it to have autofocus, but like it's on your background, you know, and then it switches to your face and it's like, you know, it goes really slow. It takes like 10 seconds to transition autofocus. So you want it to be fast, snappy. You don't want it to hunt. That's a problem that cameras have, where and let me know if you've ever noticed this. Have you ever seen a YouTube video that's out of focus? Let me know in the comments or the live chat. Or have you ever seen a YouTube video that goes in and out of focus, where it's like blur, kind of like fading in and out? Those are things that I think are less than ideal. They're distracting. Thus, the better the autofocus during video, kind of the better the impact. And so it's definitely something I prioritize when picking up. The Rio RH says always. Lindsay says yes to both. We've all seen it. So I like to really go for cameras. And this one thing can sometimes be, you know, not a deal breaker. It doesn't make cameras good or bad. But this one thing can make, it takes all the friction out of creating content. Just having something you could set up. You know, this is a Canon SL2. The fact that you can just set it up, flip the screen to yourself, touch your focus, on your screen, and it just works. It tracks your face perfectly, doesn't hunt for focus, because Canon's really good at that. But sometimes there's a trade-off for maybe other features you want, things like that. Everyone's definitely saying like, yes, I've seen that kind of hunting happening all the time. So I want the autofocus to be dependable if we're talking about creating YouTube content. And then a tip here for some geeky language is that phase detection is greater and better than contrast detection. And it's phase-based autofocus or contrast-based autofocus. So Canon, Sony are really phase-based now, and Panasonic is actually a little bit behind in this space, but still it can perform well, and the other brands are also kind of catching up. All right, number 5, audio. So I like to look for a camera that has a mic input. A headphone input is much less common right now. Just so personally, I don't actually own any cameras that have a head input. I wish I did. I believe Omar, he shoots with a A7R II. Sometimes we use his camera, so he's got a headphone jack. So you can live without it, but definitely some features I like to look for. Or good camera audio. So when you get into this, now if you're talking about vlogging with the G7X, there's no headphone jack. But the onboard audio is just for vlogging and maybe holding the camera this far is good enough for that particular type of content creation. So that is number 5. But here's a power tip. There are solutions to almost every problem. So if you're like, dude, Sean, my camera doesn't have any of this stuff you're talking about, you can still create great content. And let me actually give you an example here. I just released a video today that was asking for questions for our next Q&A series that we're doing here at Think Media. And this entire video was shot on a $190 action camera. So the Yi 4K action camera costs about $190 here in the US right now. And the whole camera was shot on that, the whole video was shot on that action camera. But what we did to record the audio was we recorded it separate. So with my iPhone, I just plugged in a Rode lavalier mic, and it's actually underneath my shirt. The audio is clipped inside my shirt, and then the cord goes down and plugs into my iPhone, and I just used the voice memos recording, and then we brought the video file into Adobe Premiere, the audio file, and we synced it up in post. So there might be a few more steps, there might be some things you have to learn, but the point is this: there's always a problem to every solution. People were making great YouTube videos 5 years ago, 7 years ago, before a lot of some of these technologies existed, so never get discouraged. But these are, again, if you're talking about your wish list, the different features you want, a mic input for good audio is definitely great. All right, number 6 is size, weight, and build, the build quality. So of course, if a GoPro could do everything, it would be the best camera because it's tiny, right? If it took images like this camera and it took video like this camera, but and a GoPro works good for action, sports, and whatever, but it's also it's limited in a lot of ways. So then you move to a point and shoot. Well, that's great, but also limited in certain ways. So then you can move to, this is a GH5. So that's good too, but maybe you want the effect, you want like a full frame sensor image and picture. Well, then you keep going up. So the cameras get bigger, but then they become maybe more bulky all the way up to maybe a pro photography camera. So just things to consider. Now, I love this quote from Chase Jarvis that says, the best camera is the one that's with you. So the problem and mistake I see people make is they're like, they get this great camera, they get a few lenses, but it's not practical to actually take with you if you plan on moving around a lot. If you're just going to set up at home, at your office, and just batch produce content and just teach on camera and stand in front of a whiteboard, whatever, just review products, well then great. Like, get a better camera that maybe can go on the road, but you're not going to have it on the road all the time. Because the problem is, if you have the best camera, but it's at home, well, then you're not going to be able to capture that image, shoot that video. And so these are things to consider. So one of the things to ask here is, what are you going to use it for? Are you going to travel with it, or are you just going to use it at home? Another thing to ask is, do you have the budget for multiple cameras? And don't forget your smartphone. So a lot of YouTubers, if they have the budget, have maybe their home rig set up or their office rig set up, and then they like to vlog with like a point and shoot camera that they can just put in their pocket or their purse or things like that. But also never forget that your smartphone can be a vlogging camera, can always be with you, quick content, but then maybe you want a little more pro video vibe. So your smartphone could be your second camera, or maybe you budget because you want to vlog and do something else. And then mirrorless cameras these days can kind of be the best of both worlds. So here's an example of like the Canon M6, which is a little bit bigger than like a G7X, but you get the interchangeable lenses, the flip up screen, but you also have a mic input, so you could take it on the road, and then you also could put it on a tripod and use it in a static situation too, plug in a mic. So a lot of mirrorless cameras can kind of be the best of both worlds these days. Now the other thing on build quality to consider is a lot of times build quality, meaning how the actual camera is constructed, is what will drive the price up of a camera. So the Canon SL2 right now is a very budget camera, but it's also very plastic. It's not weather sealed. It doesn't have any really like rubber grippiness to it. And it's also with a kit lens around, I think, $700. And so it is plastic. It's not weatherproof. Whereas this is the GH5. This is weatherproof. It's built for rugged use. It's built to be demolished. Like, it's built to like really be handled, even shoot it in light rain, things like that. But again, keep in mind this setup is about $700, and this setup is about $3,000, about $3,200 with this lens. So you kind of get what you pay for. But if you know that you don't need that extra build quality, the difference between like an SL2 and like a Canon 80D is a lot of things, but a lot of it's just the build quality. And sometimes even the internal sensor that's producing the image is the same, but you're just getting a few different features and a different build quality, you know, maybe a screen on top. And sometimes those things maybe are very important to you, but sometimes they're not going to affect the final image. And so you could get away with not paying for extra actual build quality. And guys, we are going to do Q&A. So you might have a lot of questions at this point, but we're still going. So number 7, selfie screen and touch screen. Let me know, is this one of the features that you would look for in a YouTube camera? Would you be looking for a selfie screen, you know, a touch screen? Is that something that you would desire in your camera? This is ideal for YouTubers and vloggers. This is what people a lot of times want. Isabel says yes, you know, Danielle says yes, Steven says hi. Hi, Steven. So, you know, this is ideal for YouTubers and vloggers. You want to be able to take that selfie. Everyone, you know, yes, definitely. A lot of people want that selfie screen. So this is ideal for YouTube kind of stuff. And then touchscreen makes things fast and easy, whether that's navigating menus or especially like getting focus. So what I love about some of the newer cameras is they have a touchscreen that's great for autofocus. So what you can do is you just start recording on your video camera. I might be shooting, and then all I have to do is I could just touch where I want things to be focused. So if I go to video mode here, I could just say I want to focus on the phone, and it's actually seeing the phone right now. And then I'm like, no, I want to focus on that plant back there, and it'll focus back on the plant. So touch screen and a selfie screen. So in that case, I could, how would I do this? Touch my face. Now it's like cam reception here. But then you could just reach up, touch your face, get it tracking on your face, see yourself. And so definitely a feature that I look for when picking out a camera for YouTube, if it has not just a selfie screen, but also a touch screen. All right, number 8. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and NFC. I think this is a modern feature that's important for a couple reasons. Here's why. So one, this is great for getting content to your phone for social media. So what you do here is when cameras have this, you turn it on your camera. Your camera actually creates a Wi-Fi network. Then you go into your phone and you go to your settings, right? You pick out that Wi-Fi network, you connect to it, you usually enter a password that your camera tells you. And then you make sure you download the app from your camera manufacturer, Nikon, Panasonic, Sony, Canon, whatever. And then you can open up and control your camera from the app. You could download photos, video clips over it. So if you want to take some like great photos or video clips and then just share those like on the road on Instagram, and just, you know, I do this a lot when we're just transitioning between locations. I went on a boat trip recently in Washington, took a bunch of photos on the SL2. On our way back, I just pulled like 10 off and then made a 10 photo carousel on my Instagram. Really easy just because of the Wi-Fi. So really easy to get content to social media. Plus, this is huge. You can use your phone as a remote for your camera, and if your camera doesn't have a selfie screen, you could use the Wi-Fi in the app to compose your shot. So one of the cameras I love and that we invested in recently was the Sony a6500, but it doesn't have that flip to selfie screen. A workaround is you could set the camera on the tripod. You can't see yourself, so you're like, shoot, we'll hook up the app, and now you can actually see the shot composition, so you could kind of move it. Now, usually has like a little bit of a delay, but at least you can figure out your shot composition, see if you're in focus, even start and stop record, even change the aperture, the settings, get everything right on you. Use your phone as a monitor, and that potentially is not only an easy but also free solution to set up a selfie screen. And so it's possible that the camera you already have has an app, has Wi-Fi, so definitely something to look into. All right, number 9 is considering your skill level. So keep in mind that more features doesn't necessarily mean better. And one thing that I think is pretty cool is Canon has recently released something called Feature Assist, and it shows you stuff like this. It gives you special menus, which you can turn off. So if you are already past those, it's no big deal. You just turn them off. But like you notice here, like this is helping you learn how to take photos. If you want the image to be completely frozen and the person to be stopped in time and there's a lot of motion, it's like make the shutter speed go that way. If you want there to kind of be some blur where it kind of looks cool and has a vibe, make the shutter speed go that way. So it kind of walks you through things. So this is something to consider for yourself, because again, if you get the fanciest camera, but you get overwhelmed and you don't create content because it's the learning curve's a little steep, I don't think that's the best order of things. The most important thing is that you're putting out the content, that you're posting videos, that you're like sharing your message, your story, you're practicing, you're actually using it. The other thing to consider is maybe you're watching this video as like an idea for a gift guide or a camera to get for somebody else, and they're just starting. Consider a camera that's good for a good skill level. And I know I'm talking a lot about the SL2 because I think it's great. It's one of my top picks this year, especially for beginners, especially as a budget option because it's pretty feature packed, but it also has that beginner mode as well. And then number 10 is cool features and specific needs. So just for example, some cameras have like an easy time-lapse mode. So maybe you're vlogging, you want to be able to create time lapses really easy, just like in camera. Maybe that's something. But if you don't want that, who cares? What are some of the other cool features you might not want? This is a personal thing. And so you don't necessarily just need everything for everything's sake, right? You want what you actually need. This is a camcorder, and this actually has twin cameras. So this is great for like seminars. This could be tight on the speaker, the main lens, but then this little second camera could actually be the zoomed out shot, and you can actually switch between them. So if you wanted to like do a seminar and have like the cropped in like this and then the full stage shot in one camera, well, this particular Panasonic camera can accomplish that for you. That's kind of impractical for YouTube, but what are some of the cool features or what are your specific needs? Always ask yourself that. Now, here's 2 new features that I look for in addition to these basic features. That's the main 10 things that I recommend when choosing a camera, kind of as a camera buyer's guide and a camera buying guide for you. But 2 new features that I think are really awesome and really important is number 1, in-body image stabilization. So this is one of the coolest things that have been coming to cameras lately. And this is something that makes it awesome for getting really smooth footage when you're going handheld. For instance, this SL2 does not have in-body image stabilization. So no matter how steady you are, if you're not on a tripod or a gimbal, it's kind of got a vibration and shake to it. In fact, let me ask you, have you ever seen a really shaky video or a video that has like vibration on it? Like it kind of, you're like, oh man, it's kind of got a weird jitteriness to it. Stabilization, even if there's still a shake, it's not that there's not movement. It means there's like a shake to it, like a kind of like, you know, it's got that micro jitter. Image stabilization can really minimize that. And the real RH says, yeah, you know, I've seen that. You know that, let me know. Dennis says, yep, of course. So image stabilization can really help to minimize that. Now, a couple of things to note here is that a lot of cameras have lens stabilization, also known as like optical image stabilization. And so this camera, even a Canon kit lens, you probably can't see it, but it's right on there. This little switch right here, you can turn that on and it says stabilizer on or off. That does a little bit to remove shake. And so you could see it on Canon, it could look like this, and there's a couple different modes. But here's Panasonic, it says Power OIS, that's optical image stabilization. And so lens stabilization is good. The G7X and the Sony RX100 series, one of the reasons, again, why those are so great for vlogging is because they have IS. So see this little IS right there? That means that's your image stabilization. Sony calls it steady shot optical image stabilization. And some other brands, whether Tamron, Tokina, whatever, sometimes they call their stabilization a different name. And actually what it does is it means that there's motors in the lens that are taking the shake out in the lens, thus optical. But all that buildup is to build up to the IBIS, the in-body image stabilization, which is a relatively new feature to a lot of cameras, which is a game changer. So cameras like the Canon 60 Mark II has it, the A6500 has it, the Panasonic GH5 has it, and in power tip is sometimes you can combine both. So the GH5, see, look, you could flip on the switch and you'd have the optical image stabilization, plus you'd have the in-body image stabilization. Now, this is a dream feature. It does drive up the price. Like, I haven't seen this in too many budget models. Most cameras under $1,000 don't have this. But for really getting like crazy smooth footage, handheld, the in-body image stabilization is a huge feature that can be really awesome. And then the second kind of newer feature that not everybody needs is frame rates and slow motion. So I like to look for cameras that have other frame rates so that you can create slow motion content. So I don't want to get too geeky here, but what this means is, like, you could see the GH5 here does 4K at 60 frames a second. I edit my videos in 30 frames a second in Adobe Premiere. Thus, if you shoot 60 frames a second video, that means you have twice the amount of frames that are happening every single second, so you could get 50% slow motion. So when you hear me talk about in videos like the SL2 does 1080p 60 frames a second, then that means it can do slow motion really smooth. And as you're seeing some other cameras, the RX105 has a couple like really high frame rates, like 120 or 240 frames per second. Now, a lot of cameras have those higher frame rates, but they have them at like, it lowers the resolution. So you can do like slow motion, but it's at 720p or 480p. It's like going back to DVD quality, like we talked about in the beginning of this video. And you can do slow motion in DVD quality, but you have to do either one. You have to stretch the video bigger, or it would be like small inside of the frame. So the higher end camera you get, like an A6500, for example, can do slow motion while keeping the frame rate or the actual resolution high, like 4K or HD. So you can see in here different things like that. So we got a little techie. Now keep in mind, you might be like, dude, Sean's making me want camera MV. Now I need slow motion. Do you? I mean, are you going to use it? You might not even need it or use it, so you could skip this part. But personally, those first 10 things plus these second two have really been influencing me lately. And I'd love to hear from you. Like, post definitely in the comments and in the live chat if I'm even missing any features that I didn't recommend. You know, I would love to hear from you, especially some of you. There's some experts that are part of, and seasoned people, veterans that are part of this Think Media community, right? So let me know if you think there's like, dude, you completely missed a feature. Definitely post that in the comments. But before we get into Q&A, I have some resources for you. So 2 recommended videos. One, we recently released our best camera for YouTube this year. And so that, if you want to go watch that, you can click the YouTube card, or the link is in the description. And now you definitely will understand why, like, these are the kind of the factors that went into me narrowing down the top picks of the year. This is what influenced that. And then, but you also might be saying, like, Sean, dude, like, I don't have $1 billion. What's going on here? Am I stuck? Am I hopeless? I don't have much money. So I got you covered. We got a video called Best Cheap Cameras for YouTube. And so that's on the YouTube card as well as in the description. And so again, you can get a lot of high performance without breaking the bank. and that video goes through some of those things. So those are a couple of videos to watch. And then I also mentioned that free download. We'll get to that in a Q&A in just a second. But final thoughts. Ansel Adams, recognized as one of the great photographers of history, says that the single most important component of a camera is the 12 inches behind it. And so now that we've said all this, keep in mind, right, that skill in video is acquired by practice, not by purchase. So always start with the camera you have. Never be like, I can't post videos, I need to wait until I get a new camera. No, post videos now and also get a new camera. Save up, but always be pumping out content starting with exactly what you have. I mean, I know when I started, it's crazy to even do this video because I started in video production in 2003 with a Canon HV30 camcorder that recorded on mini DV tapes, and I had to capture minute for minute video footage over FireWire into Adobe Premiere was what I was using back then, and it was DVD quality. It was actually an HD camera, but we didn't have a computer that was strong enough to edit HD, which is most people's case today when it comes to 4K. It's like, cool, your camera can shoot 4K, but you don't have a computer that can actually handle it. But all that to say, right, is that the single most important component of the camera is the 12 inches behind it. So, a lot of times level up your skills, keep practicing, keep posting videos, but then like anybody, especially when you fall in love with video and YouTube, of course, you want to get that gear, because maybe there's some pieces of gear that now that you're like, okay, I am limited. I put out a lot of videos, but there's some things I want to do, and I need these features to get that. That is the journey that you want to go on personally. And I mentioned our gear guide. If you've never downloaded that before, this actually goes through. It's the Think Media Gear Guide, the best cameras, but also microphones, lights, tripods for every budget. And so if you want to check that out, you could grab that free. It's a PDF download, and then we can email it to you. You just go, there's a link in the description. You go to the page, enter your name and email so we know where to send the free guide. And it reminds me of that tip that the big mistake people make sometimes is they get so infatuated with the camera and they forget that if you want to make some great YouTube videos, sometimes the biggest difference you can make in your video quality is not by upgrading your camera, it's actually by upgrading your lighting. So if you had $1,000 for a camera and a lens and a tripod, I might recommend only getting a camera for $800, spending $100 or $200 on lighting, and that's gonna make any camera look a lot better, even your phone, than potentially spending it all on a camera. Whoa, hey, I hope you've been getting a lot out of this live stream. Can you smash the like button if you've been getting value out of it? And I'm excited to dive into some of your questions. And thanks so much for being here today. By the way, I hope that this audio is synced up. We finally, I think, have got our YouTube setup going for live streaming. Right now, we're off the GH5, going into a capture card in this PC here. What is up? I hope it looks good. I hope it sounds good. And I think we finally found a way to keep the audio synced and everything crispy. I'm pumped, but let me know how the feed looks as well. All right, Alexander asks, hey man, love your videos and live stream. Do you think you could do a live stream on the best gaming and university laptops under $1,000? Absolutely. We'll put that in the video queue. We have a lot of new content coming out on live streaming soon. The Real RH. I really want to start vlogging, but I also want to make short films. Any suggestions? I think you could do both. And if you've, of course, seen Casey Neistat very much popularized it, and now everybody does it. But a lot of times people, you see them running around with like this deal. Whoops. By the way, that happens all the time. You just pop it back in. So you could, with the DSLR and the shotgun mic, I would probably recommend like maybe a Canon M6 because it's a mirrorless camera. It's pretty small for vlogging, or for vlogging, in my opinion, I think autofocus is really important. The Sony A6500, you're not gonna be able to see yourself, but a lot of people can get around that. That is a great camera for vlogging. You could do high quality, or the Canon 70D, 80D, even the SL2. Watch a couple of our videos and maybe some of the other Think Media videos. But when you say both, then I would recommend a camera that's either mirrorless or a DSLR that's got that mic input, so you could do some short films. You have interchangeable lenses so that you can do that film style shooting and have a lot of, when you can change lenses, you can create any look you want. You could borrow lenses, you could rent lenses, you could borrow lenses from friends, one body becomes almost infinitely scalable. When you have fixed lenses, you're a little bit more limited, but the real RH, I want to encourage you, you can make short films really with any camera, you know, like even your smartphone, and there's some good videos. Look up like short films made with like an iPhone or a smartphone. It's pretty impressive. Bianca, what's the best camera for vlogging at the same time for sit-down videos that's a little cheap and does great in low light? Because I'm debating on the G7X or the RX100 or a DSLR, and I think you're good on all of those. The difference between a G7X Mark V or a Sony RX100, the newest version, and a G7X, either the oldest version or Mark II, is mostly price and then features. So for about $500, you could buy the first version of a G7X, which is great, and to most people's eyes is probably not going to look much different than a Sony RX100. Sony RX100 is going to give you a few better features like 4K, but you may not edit in 4K, so you can live without it and save money. It also is preferred by more filmmakers who want to like color grade their footage, maybe shoot in like really flat profiles. And so if that's not making sense, don't even worry about it. And so I think that there's a reason why these two cameras are like pretty much undebatably the best point and shoot, carry around, walk around vlogging cameras. Furthermore, you probably don't want to run around with like a huge rig, you know, but if you do, you could get a DSLR and kind of use it for both. But for you, I'd probably recommend, I also tell you this, my friends Benji and Judy Travis, It's Judy's Life vloggers, they recently just went with the G7X Mark II. So that's what they're using. And then priorly, they were actually using a Canon S120 for vlogging, which you can't really find anymore. It's such a great camera, but you could buy one used. History asks, in addition to my question about a good shotgun mic, less than $100 for a camcorder with no hot shoe and a mic input, I'd love that mic to be good for outdoors. So you're looking for a good shotgun mic for a camcorder with no hot shoe, but with a mic input. So I think it's called the TAKSTAR. It's about a $40 microphone on Amazon, and we'll re-go through the show and link everything up in the description below. So any of the cameras we mentioned, we'll put those down there so you can find the exact model numbers. I forget the exact name of it. It's about 40 bucks. But here's what you can find is you can find a lot of brackets and a lot of, so if there's no hot shoe, there's things that you can get, like let's say this was a tripod, and even this is like a bracket. You can get a piece that kind of pulls over to the side that lets you mount more things on it. And so look up like video mounting brackets, look up like tripod brackets, camera cages. These types of things allow you to maybe just mount your camera, but then put a light on top and put a mic on top. And those are things I would recommend. And then that way you could just put that off to the side, put that $40 mic on there, and you'd be good to go. Isabel asks, are these cameras good for YouTube? The Nikon D33 or 3400, the SL1 or T6. My budget is around $560. So those Nikons I've heard are pretty good. I just haven't tested them. The SL1 is pretty good with no flip screen, but the image quality is going to be pretty similar to the SL2, and you can find that for very affordable. But not the T6. A huge mistake people are making with Canon. And it's not that it's bad, but when you don't have the eye on Canon, you don't have the mic input. I'm not sure what else is different, but usually the T5, the T6 is more like photo, and you could shoot video. But the reason why they recommend like the T6i or the T7i and why they bundle those with creator kits is because they're almost thinking with video in mind, and that usually means the mic input. To my knowledge, those first three cameras you mentioned have mic inputs, and that can be very convenient and important for creating YouTube videos, just like any YouTuber would, with like a good mic, reviewing makeup, lifestyle, good audio, good video. And so those first three would be great. Also, check out the videos I recommended, and we'll put a couple other videos that I'm thinking about based off these questions as well. In the comments. So actually, Heather, I don't know if it's possible to kind of leave some of the questions up or whatever. Heather's helping me in the questions here, and then that way I could go through and think about some of the things I mentioned, even from here going forward. Coco says, is there a big difference between the 70D and the M6 for video shooting? So the 70D and the M6 are a DSLR versus a mirrorless camera. And sometimes what people will say is that a DSLR is superior. That's debated. But a mirrorless is more portable. They're typically smaller, and so the 70D is sometimes going to, but other than that, they're pretty similar. The other thing is that a lot of times the mirrorless lenses, this is a huge thing, are more limited. So even Canon's M6 lens options, there's a lot less lens options than there are for a DSLR. One thing to also just share with everybody when picking out a camera is Canon has like the biggest lens selection out of any manufacturer, which is nice because there's a lot of good budget options. It's really easy to find used lenses on eBay, Craigslist, and some of the other brands, they haven't even been in the game as long. So Sony, Panasonic, sometimes they have less lens options. It's not a deal breaker in either case, but just something to consider. So if I was going to answer your question, I would get probably the 70D if I knew I didn't need the camera to be small and I didn't need it to be light. But if there was something about it that I knew I did want to travel with it and I wanted it to be smaller and light, I would probably go more for the M6. Gadget Gamer TV, are there any cameras for solo talk videos with good autofocus? Yeah, I think I see gamer in your name. I think honestly there's some good webcams if you're just going to be gaming, and they could be very affordable. I also think that like the Canon SL2, just for talking solo, it is the first Canon camera that's so cheap with dual pixel autofocus. You can get the body, I think, for $550, and there's cheap Canon lenses out there for like $100. So even not getting the kit lens or even with the kit lens, that's definitely a good one. And one of the things that camera that people love right now is the Panasonic G7 because it does 4K, lots of cool features. But and lots of people have no issue with the autofocus, or what they do is they get it in focus and turn the autofocus off. I'm shooting on GH5. It doesn't have the best autofocus, but I got the camera in focus and then I just click it to manual. So this whole time I can talk on camera. So when I say there's a solution to every problem, it's just not tracking me, but it can stay. No hunting, no issues. I mean, I think this looks good. How do you think this looks? So a G7 is pretty cool as well. Wolfpack with the super chat. What camera setup would you suggest for outdoor use? I have a camping channel and would like quality video that will hold up in the weather. We saw early on here Left Coast Media, and he has a GH5. I think his channel is definitely good to check out for what he's able to. He does adventure filmmaking, slacklining, and he's just slaying it with the GH5. So filmmakers really want, I think the GH5 is a good choice. I think any weatherproofed Canon camera, it's going to be more expensive, but if you're going to be camping and stuff, you probably want that investment. And the other thing though is if you want to spend a little less, there's things like I think it's called the Tough Touch Olympus camera. These things are like windproof, dustproof, freeze proof. They're like indestructible. A couple $100, but again, not interchangeable lenses. It just depends on what you need. So that's we have a camera video about that. So there's some good like rugged cameras that you could research as well. Video Media TV says, would you suggest buying at a store or online is probably cheaper? That's a good question. A lot of stores will price match. And so Fry's here in Vegas, or if you have a Fry's by you, of course you might be international, Best Buy, they will price match. So you could always go into the store. I like online personally. Amazon, a tip is the Amazon used section if you don't mind used gear, and of course it's returnable. Look at the return policy. Refurbished, the Canon refurbished store is cool. That Canon refurbished store comes with a year warranty. So Canon online and the refurbished store, and eBay, BH Photo has a used section. I'll do another video. We've done some videos in the past, but I've got some new tips. So I'm going to do a new video like this on how to save money, best places to buy cameras, ways to save money. Even Craigslist, if you feel confident, not just about not getting like mugged and imprisoned, but maybe like, kidnapped. That sounds awful, but like meeting strangers, but also like really knowing the equipment well enough. You don't want to go to a deal when you check it out visually and you're like, oh, I didn't actually test it out fully. So that's a caution on used gear. I usually like if you buy used gear, make sure it's got like 30 days return policy. So you just know like you're safe. What was your first camera? I mentioned it earlier in the video. Check that out on the replay. Sonic Man says, Sean, what's a good camera and a lens for filming tight shots for a food cooking channel? That's a great question. If you really want cool, tight shots, get a camera that can have interchangeable lenses and invest in a 50mm lens or even an 85mm lens. So if you want a very cool looking dynamic, think about getting an 85mm lens. If you were going to be investing in Canon, the Nifty 50 is a cheap lens that can get great results. It's pretty famous because it has a really good look, 1.8 aperture, so good in low light, and it's very cheap. But another one is Canon also has like an 85 1.4, I believe, that is quite a bit more cheaper, quite a bit cheaper than like the 85 1.2, which is like $2,000 or somewhere up there. Whereas the 1.4 you can maybe find a little bit cheaper. But yeah, definitely if you want to create some of those dynamics and an interchangeable lens, a camera, and then just research a little bit more to get those vibes. SMDA says, what do you think about the Canon T5i for short films? Great. I mean, tons of people have been using the Canon Rebel series, and there's a little hack depending on how much into filmmaking you get. Magic Lantern is a software plugin. Now, use at your own risk. People don't really have issues, but you're installing like different software on the camera. You install like an upgrade. It changes your menus around, but it gives you a lot of filmmaking features like zebras and audio monitoring. So people have been creating incredible films with like T2 eyes, T3 eyes. So always remember, everybody, use what you have and like learn how to maximize what you have. So look for other people on YouTube that are using maybe the exact camera you have or want, that are good, you love their work, and even reach out to them. That's one thing to consider. Like, don't hesitate to tweet somebody and be like, hey man, you use like the same camera as me, but like your footage looks way better. What'd you do? And try to figure out like how they got those results with that particular camera. Taylor asks, best camera to film craft art videos that will focus on your hands and move quickly. So I'd say Sony or Canon. And so when I go into video mode here, I can click the Q here, and I can click, it's really cool. It's super easy to go between face tracking and smooth zone focus. So zone focus would hit your hands. It's going to just focus on a zone. Whatever's in that zone, it'll focus on. And Sony will do some of the same things. So I would say for a craft, like really good craft channel, crispy footage, one of the Canon cameras with dual pixel autofocus. And check out my best camera video. I have a list in there of all the cameras with dual pixel autofocus, or like a Sony a6500. That's what we recently invested in. And you might not need that flip screen because you might be behind the camera with your arms in front of it, and so you could even see what you're doing. So that's a thought. Cheese Grits asks, how is the autofocus on the M6 as good as the 70 or 80D? I've not tested it. They both have dual pixel, but the difference is one is mirrorless and one is a DSLR. So maybe somebody in the community could say in the comments or live chat, but it should be the same. However, typically I've noticed mirrorless is a little bit slower on the autofocus. Not a deal breaker, but it's just a little bit. All three of those would be great. And when you say the 70D or 80D, those are about the same. Now, one factor that can affect that, and we didn't talk about this in the video because we're focusing on video and not photography, but the amount of autofocus points. So cheaper cameras like the Sony, the Canon SL2 only has like 9 autofocus points, which means like 9 different points where it's like gearing focus. We recently did a first impressions of the Sony A9, which is $5,000, but it has like almost 1,000 autofocus points. So that's like how many points, and then everywhere in between. So when you go from like the 70D, it might have, 24 or 45. The 80D might have like 45, and anywhere in between. So that in combination could also help. So even though they're both dual pixel, the more autofocus points, and again, you can get so wrapped up in the nuances of this, and just like I don't know, does your brain hurt? Let me know if your brain hurts. But definitely, that's one distinction. How many autofocus points does it have? Mirrorless versus DSLR. But for Canon cameras that you just mentioned, if it has dual pixel autofocus, you're pretty much good to go. And then part of it's practice and learning about being in lighting and stuff too. No camera is usually good at like tracking your face if like you're dark and if like your face is dark and the background is really light. That's not a good situation for the camera to know what's going on. Right now, the background's a little bit darker, so the light hitting my face, you know, this would be easier for cameras to focus on. And so that's like studying, you know, practicing your craft, honing your craft, and things like that. Well, guys, thanks so much for being here. We're definitely going to do future live streams like this and get more questions. Do me a favor. If you got value out of this, can you smash the like button? Definitely check out show notes and links of everything I talked about in the description below. If you have any questions, I'm going to go in right now and add some more additional things, link up all the YouTube cards. But the last thing that really helps me, and it's a huge bummer about how YouTube works, is that the live chat disappears after live streams are over. So if you got value out of this and you've got the time, it'll probably take about 20-30 minutes for this video to show up on YouTube on the replay, and we'll tweet it out. But if you could leave a comment on this video or come back and ask a question, that would be absolutely huge and would mean the world to me. In fact, question of the day, and you can hit it up in the live chat, but definitely leave this in the comments if you can come back. Question of the day is, what are your tips for choosing a camera, and what features do you look for? Like, what are the things that you're looking for? Whether you don't have any tips, what kind of features do you want? What are the top priorities for you? Or maybe you watch this video, you're like, you missed a few things. What are some of your tips for choosing a camera? Again, if you can come back, leave those in the comments when the replay's here. That would mean the world to me. Guys, Think Media, we're here to bring you the best tips and tools for building your influence with online video. I appreciate you taking the time to hang out today, whether live or on the rebroadcast, and excited to be sharing new videos and new live streams with you in the future. And thanks for being a part of this community. And so in the meantime, keep crushing it, keep smashing it. I'll see you in a future video, and we will talk soon.